So that's where we're at. Part 2, Juma the Jaguar.
I've owned a cat or I've lived with a cat before. Not a big cat like this, but I know how cats behave.
I don't have a whole ton of experience with carnivores, to be honest. But one of the most vivid things that I can recall from my time, especially as an intern, going from place to place, trying to accrue the experience to eventually get a full-time job, was when I worked with lions, when I worked in a carnivore department that had lions. And specifically that image is the male lion.
I've lived with a cat before. Not a big cat like this, but I know how cats behave.
The first thing that I have to say is just how different it is to see a lion up close. How frightening they are, even when they're not really being frightening. But what I remember is one of the things you do as a zookeeper is you check a lot of locks. And that's as simple as it sounds. You make sure that the locks are actually locked. And, you would always check the locks before leaving a building. So at night when you let the lions in, you would check the locks before you let them out during the day. For the day, you would check the locks. Someone stopped to say hi to you, you'd go back and check the locks after. You did a lot of lock checking because that's important. Animals get out, you're in trouble. But I remember there was this male lion at this zoo, and I remember one of the things that I struggled with that summer was not flinching when he would roar at you. Now a lion's roar is I can physically remember the feeling of being inside the lion house at night before they went to bed. They would whenever we brought them in at night to go to bed, they would always do the same thing. They would do this big group roar. And I remember even throughout the foundations, you could just feel the vibrations of their roars, just their calls. I mean, lions, those roars are meant to be territorial. They're meant to establish a pride's territory. They can be heard from miles away. So it was excruciatingly loud. But I remember this one male lion that I worked with, he liked to, when you were checking the locks on his door, he liked to sneak up on you and roar in your face. And I don't think there's any more singularly frightening image that I can recall than a male lion roaring in your face. There were seasoned keepers who had worked there multiple years, had tons of experience with those animals, who still would flinch when they would do that. And I specifically remember the sequence of events, the sequence of behaviors leading up to the roar. It was always the same. It was incredible to me how silent the whole thing was, how slowly it happened, but then how quickly it came at you. He would start at the back of his stall and he would slowly just move up towards the fence, just quietly. His head never left you. He'd always be looking at you. And male lions, they have these eyes. It's just like these set of eyes that look into your soul. Like they just burn themselves into you. It's like pure killing intent. Absolutely terrifying. But that's the first thing you'd see. You'd look up and you'd see the lion face right in front of you. You wouldn't hear any of it, but you'd look up from checking the lock and you'd see that face right in front of you. And then, it would come at you a little bit faster and then you get blasted with that roar that would shake the whole building. It happened many times to me over that summer. There was nothing more frightening. I remember I was very familiar, even before working with big cats, what canine hunting behavior was like. And I remember wolf hunting behavior that basically meant if there was no fence in front of me, I would attack that person, I would eat them, was they would go back and forth along the fence line, but they would turn like that, but they would never move their head away from you. They would always have their head on you. It's like the whole rest of the body would pivot, but the head would stay in the same position. And that's a little bit freaky, in my opinion, that their head never moves, their eyes never move from the target. They never shy from the sword. So I can understand how a zookeeper who doesn't have control of a big cat, how they can see the I'm going to attack you behavior, and how that can be blood chilling, how that can be like lightning through your system, that something's coming, something bad's going to come. you know that you're being hunted.
I don't know why they killed this cat. I don't know why they murdered this cat. But if it was shot with 4 tranquilizer darts, it was not still coming at them.
For me, knockdown, tranquilizer, anesthetization, drugs were easily the most interesting topic that you could bring up in a conversation with me about zoos. Just the stories that different people would tell about different drugs and what they had seen, different dark gun stories. The sheer breadth of experiences that different people had were fascinating to me. And it was, in a lot of ways, even though, there were established doses that you would use in certain situations and certain animals, and even though there were a lot of regulations and stuff, basically, it was a very imprecise science. Different animals responded differently to different drugs, different individuals, different species. Depending on where you shot them, they might react differently. And that leads to a lot of interesting field stories. I remember there was one story about a wolf that was shot with a dart, and they're supposed to go into the muscle, and when they go into the muscle, there's actually a part of the dart that moves when it makes contact and actually just sprays it all over that muscle, the inside. It's like literally like if you took a dart and you activate it just in your hand, it would be like a fountain. Like it just sprays all around it, just as covers much area as it can, so it reacts quickly. But this story, I guess it actually got lodged in the scapula of the animal, so it didn't really work properly. And they kept the dart, and I remember they took it out, and I guess it looked like a candy cane, it looked like a pretzel almost, like just how messed up it was after the whole deal with the animal trying to shake it off and batting at it and stuff like that. So very messy stuff, very painful experience for that animal. Definitely didn't activate in the way it's supposed to. I heard other stories about how an animal was actually got right in the neck, and you got certain significant veins and vessels in the neck, so they literally just fell down like right away, like just out, like a direct shot. Ooh, it's right into the bloodstream. So that was, it's pretty crazy, some of the things you hear. Even specific drugs, I remember for wolves, I think ketamine, xylazine was a very common mixture that they used for those animals. Ketamine, think of Special K, like the party drug. I remember Tilazol, ketamine was another one. I met a manager who wasn't a fan of Tilazol because he felt like in his experience when the wolves that he worked with, when that was used on them, when they actually came out, when they would come out of their sleep, so to speak, they would come up and act aggressively. So he wasn't a fan of it for that reason, because in experience those animals had responded that way or that, and he subscribed to a mixture of drugs that he felt like they came up much more easily out of. So but depending on the animal, the individual animal, the species of animal, the size of that animal, the dosage you're using, depending on where the dart actually hits them, where it inserts, can make a big difference in the outcome. And when you're in the field and you're out of control of the animal and you're in an emergency situation, that can become very, 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 very imprecise. You can find yourself very unprepared very, very quickly. You can find yourself with a very unideal shot very quickly. So, the number of darts in an animal is not necessarily telling of how things are going to go, of what an animal is responding, what their reaction was. That depends on a lot of factors that are not always the easiest to predict.
Explained that the Jaguar was hit with 4 tranquilizer darts that did not slow it down and turn on the veterinarian, forcing the soldiers to use the bullets. Yes, this Jaguar was murdered execution style. I don't know why they killed this cat. I don't know why they murdered this cat.
I remember when I was a kid, I watched, I can't remember the name of the show now. It was on either Discovery Channel or Animal Planet about, I think it was called Fatal Attractions. But this specific episode that I recall most prominently was about chimpanzees and people who had owned chimpanzees privately, and how one of the first things I learned about monkeys or primates was, especially about chimpanzees, was even in show business, once they hit the age of 7, they become far too strong for humans to really handle them, for humans to really control them, for you to really work with them directly. Primates, chimpanzees are retired around the age of 7 for that reason, from working in Hollywood, from working directly with people in professional environments. That doesn't necessarily always happen for private citizens who own these animals. Well into their adulthood, these animals, because they maybe have a strong bond with that private citizen, that they can be harmless. But seemingly there comes a day when the animal wakes up and they realize that they're a chimp, that they can do serious harm to a human. And I remember particularly the one story where a chimp actually attacked and really disfigured the friend of one of those private citizens, the friend of the person who owned that animal. And I remember one of the revelations that one of the guest speakers for that show talked about was she respected that woman for calling the police when that chimp attacked her friend, and telling them to come on, you gotta help this person, he's killing her, you gotta come, you shoot it. That she could have, because she had, grown up with that animal, because she had seen him in a lot of ways develop just like a child, that she could have not done that. She could have not taken care of her friend. She could have taken care of the chimpanzee. And I would have to wonder, if I knew that person, and I knew that it happened, that their chimp had attacked someone, and that she hadn't done anything about it, that she hadn't taken care of that person, or done everything in her power to try to save that person, would I be comfortable seeing her again? How would I feel about that person? I think that's a real reality that you have to consider in this whole thing. That whether or not you feel like the animal deserved to die is sort of irrelevant. The zookeeper responsibility is to protect human life. I remember this other show. I think it was just the most extreme animal videos type show, but it had this. It was about this like. It had this 5-second feature. This guy who tried to get into the lion exhibit at a zoo in China, and I guess he was like on drugs or something like that. He was having an experience on substances. And he decided it would be a good idea to hop into the lion exhibit. So he did, and he was attacked by the animals. He wasn't killed initially. The animals were probably completely frightened, and they probably wanted to stay away from him just as much as he didn't want them to scratch at him anymore or bite him anymore. But what the zoo did was, I guess they used fire hoses to keep the animals away from that individual, that man, and then they just tried to dart the lions. And I remember thinking, like, they're spraying the fire hose. Like, what if you hit the guy? What if you hit the guy and he falls in the moat and he cracks his skull and he dies? In fact, in the video, even when they're spraying the fire hoses, the lions still attack the guy. He could have died. And I think there are a lot of situations in there where the resulting dialogue could have been that zoo didn't do enough to protect that individual. Even though he was doing something he absolutely shouldn't do, he was totally in the wrong, that he was doing something he shouldn't have done. I don't know if I feel like, even though the animal did survive that one, some part of me feels like that they didn't do the right things there. What do you think?